I'm here talking with Richard Michael from BigBadBonds.com. I'd like to know what you know about the CASH organization. Are they lobbyists? How do they train the school boards? What's their convention like? Whatever information you have that would help people in Cardiff and other communities understand who's behind these measures.
CASH is one of maybe 3 or 4 major organizations in the state that I, in a combination with each other, I call the School Bonds Cartel. CASH started in 1978, and it was started by a lobbying firm, Murdoch, Walrath, and Holmes. The incipiency of the CASH organization was not goodwill or anything, and their whole purpose, as their name implies, Coalition for Adequate School Housing, is to help pull money out of taxpayers' pockets, both from state bonds and from local bonds, which goes on property taxes, to give as much money as you can to the people that make the money off of it. All the vendors that don't necessarily just do construction, but do the major kinds of, white-collar type work that's involved in getting all these things done, from CEQA studies, California Environmental Quality Act studies, and, facilities planning, architects, construction managers. There's a whole litany of types of vendors that are involved in this. And CASH has been one of the focal points of this. And they started in 1978, so they just had their conference in February. It was their 39th annual conference, so that shows you how old they are. And like I said, it's a lobbying group. But the lobbying organization, Murdoch, Walrath, and Holmes, they are also serve as what they call a association manager. And then for the associations that they work with, they're also what they call their legislative analyst, which is the lobbyist in what you and I would call it. So they charge money to the members of the association for their services as an association manager. They charge them as a lobbyist, and then they make profits off of everything they do with cash and those kind of deals. They collect membership dues. Whatever it is that they do, they make money off of it all. So the lobbyists are millionaires on this because most school districts in the state are members. Plus, they have every bond lawyer, school district lawyer, construction firm, any manufacturer that manufactures things specifically for schools. They all join this, and they pay thousands of dollars a year. So we're talking about at least several million, maybe up to $5 million a year that they just get. The association gets from this, the fees that they charge. In other words, anything to do with money from the taxpayers to their vendors, basically, because the school districts don't make the money; they just are the conduits for it.
Well, someone must be getting something to what convinces the school boards to go as far out as to, fool people into voting for things. And I see that the vendors make a lot of money, and I know CASH makes a lot of money because I saw on their convention flyers they had exclusive sponsorship opportunities. You can put your name and logo on a room key card for $11,000, on your conference lanyard for $5,500. You can do an infomercial for $7,500, USB flash drive for $6,000, conference tote bags $6,000. So it goes on and on. So I know CASH is making the cash.
And that's only their main annual conference that you're talking about. But they have other conferences during the year. In the past, they've also had junkets to Hawaii and places like that where they have these conferences. So, and when the people go there, the private firms, obviously, this is part of their sales budget that they're using. But for school district people, that's public dime. And because you'll see in the school district budgets, if you look around June, July minutes, you will see every district in the state has a list of memberships that they renew every year. And in some districts, it could be dozens or to almost 100 different memberships, some costing, only a few dollars, but some costing hundreds or thousands of dollars to be members. and the school districts pay for the membership. They pay for their employees to go to these events. They pay for the lodging, the hotel, the schmoozing, the wining and dining. They pay for everything, just like they were selling something. But they're just there to be, milked, so to speak. And the way I picture this is, back in the 80s, I think the Wayans brothers had a television show called Living Color with Jim Carrey and the Wayans brothers, and they had a skit called Mo Money, where they dreamed up all these schemes to get more money. So there's Mo Money, Mo Money, Mo Money.
Mo Money, Mo Money, Mo Money.
That's what they're doing. Anything to generate money for themselves or the people that they're in on. And as a result, they get. I mean, obviously, there are some school construction money that's actually being spent for schools, but the big majority of it, in my view, is being spent on things that do not get to the bottom line, where they improve classrooms or actual facilities that students use. Cash is not the only group that trains the people, all right? There are many organizations that are involved in this that are all membership organizations that attract either school staff, like the superintendents and staff, that attract the board members. There's separate organizations, or specific areas of the school business people that join these organizations to basically learn how to do either their jobs or, more importantly, how to get more money so that they keep having their jobs. So it's not just cash. But when you see these conferences, and they all have their annual conferences, sometimes multiple ones a year, whenever you see these conferences, they always have their agendas of, the tracks or different tracks that you go on. You can learn about, ways to, some of them are legitimately good stuff, I imagine, but they're always selling something. The bond stuff, though, is, how to pass your local bond, and that's the more money part. Small school districts are especially amenable to this kind of stuff because they don't have a lot of resources typically, like the bigger districts. When they hear somebody comes knocking on their door and saying, or they go to a meeting and they schmooze with people and say, well, tell me about what you do, or how we get these bonds passed, and they're all too willing.
Why should you exhibit at CSBA's annual education conference and trade show?
Why? Because this is the best way for us to reach out to our prospective clients. So, we've kind of had the really fun booth, and that's typically what we do every year. So we get tons of business cards, tons of client interaction, just because we like to have fun, and so do all the school board members.
CSBA, I believe, has videos on its website where some of these bond vendors, like ISM advisors, actually they're recorded events on how to get the bonds passed, where you have the Greg or John Isom talking about how to do it specifically. In other words, how to hire the people that are going to do the marketing materials, the children materials, the great schools materials, whatever it is that they need, so that all that stuff can be passed. And it all comes out of the public money. And this is one of the things that Big Bad Bonds is working on even more heavily now, is to try to point this out more or get people riled up about it so that they make complaints, because these are either criminal or civil violations of actual law.
Is there any kind of kickback for the school board? They're working hard. They get barely over $1,000 a year for what they do, and they're very adamant about this project and about tearing down the school. And I'm wondering who's getting paid. One of them is a vice president at Merrill Lynch, so I'm assuming he helped one of his companies get that $14 million bond that they issued right away. I'm just wondering, do they get any kickbacks that you've heard of? Is there anything, that they're benefiting?
There won't be a kickback in that sense, I think, for most of these people. And these are hard things to prove. They could have relationships with, business relationships or associations with some of the vendors, where the vendor is doing something for them as well. That is the kind of pay-to-play kickback type of thing that you might see, where they get some, like, oh, you're going to do solar at the school. How about doing my house with solar type stuff? Give me a good price. Most school board members probably are not into that kind of thing, but there might be one or two in any district that would be amenable to that being approached. But they always have to worry about that they're not being part of an FBI sting or something to catch them. So I would say it's not worth the liabilities that they might have to do that kind of stuff. But the superintendents and the actual school administrators, they're totally under the radar. They're unelected. They're appointed. So you don't really know anything about what their relationships are with the people that they're doing business with. Sometimes it could be, second cousins, wives, brother-in-laws. And since a lot of women nowadays have, keep their a professional name rather than the married name, sometimes you don't even know that they're related. I would think it's much more likely in the staff of the district than the trustees themselves. But the trustees have a face-saving thing that I think that they're, they want to be acknowledged for. Why are they doing this for such a low amount of money? It's for prestige or something that they feel a need for, and they're doing it for that purpose. And so when they put out, they pass this bond, and now they want to see it done. Maybe they'll get a plaque with their names on it, that shows built by, thanks to the trustees. Right here in my district, they did pass a bond, a bond that I didn't fight because nobody was willing to, help me with it. But so they have a huge, 12 by 15 foot sign at one of the schools with, thank you for passing WV, just like you see on the interstates, your money at work, your gas tax money at work or stuff like that. And on that list, it has every one of the trustees' names on that billboard, basically.
Well, I imagine these guys showing up at the cash convention and being celebrated and, applauded for getting this measure passed.
Well, I'm sure that the people that are making the direct money, the bond counsel and the financial advisors are applauding them, and they're looking down the road like, okay, when can we get the next one done? I'm just looking at on my website, and I just pulled it up from the page where I have the Cardiff stuff. And I'm looking at the bond that was issued, all right, because in January or February 2017, last year, they issued the bond. So this is already on your property tax. And they issued $14 million of it, so that's more than half. And the lawyers, the advisors, the issue costs were $387,000 on that. So this is why they do it. The financial advisor got $78,000. The lawyer got $35,000. The underwriter got $435,000. And they issued that was the discount. Anyway, they got all this money from issuing the bond. They're going to issue another one for the balance of the $8 million at some point, and then they will have they will have all their money in the bank, so to speak. The underwriter is the person that says, sort of like an IPO, initial public offering. They're basically funding the whole thing. They're underwriting it, basically providing the funds to do it, and then they're the first seller. In other words, so that their direct clients, are the ones that get the best prices. Once it's out in the market, then anybody can buy it for whatever price they can get it at, and that doesn't affect the school's money, because that's just the market value of the bond.
But if you have somebody who's an investment advisor at Merrill Lynch, he might be able to arrange for some of his clients to get some of that good pricing.
Yeah, there could be that kind of relationship, but that's hard to find. But let's just look at. I'll just look at this one bond, because this is, people won't know, but it is on your tax bill already for the 2017-18 tax bill. So you should go back and look at what your tax bill shows for this bond that just came, this $14 million, because they got it at 3.8% interest. Now, that's incredible. Looking at what other bonds are being sold at currently, that's a pretty high rate. They issued a bond I'm looking at one they issued in 2010, and that was only at 2.5% interest. So they're paying almost 40%, more than 40% almost 60% more in interest than they did on a previously issued bond. So you don't know why did they go for 3.8%? I mean, that sounds awfully high. And what I'm getting at here is that there are limits on how much they can issue, because they put in the bond measure, and we're talking about Cardiff. They put that the tax rate would be about $25 per 100,000. Their maximum tax rate for that bond measure, GG, is $30. So if you look at your tax bill right now, and you see a number like I don't know, $24 or something that you're paying per 100,000. If that's the rate that you're paying right now, that means they're almost maxed out. They may not be able to issue the $8 million because they can't issue more than $30 for a elementary school district. They can't use a tax rate of more than $30 by law, and there's no way to get around that. That I'm aware. Well, there is, but there would have to be a very severe hardship situation. So they may have already maxed themselves out on this with that high interest rate, and
not be able to sell the other $8 million.
They might not be able to. I'm just saying, because at 3.8%, and this is going to 2046, so the maturity that won't be paid off until 2046. And your district, I mean, they've issued 3 bonds in the last 50 years. One from the previous measure that was $11 million, and that they did one of those capital appreciation bonds, accreting interest, so that the taxpayers didn't see the thing on their statements until after the money was now much more than what they were originally bonded out for. They recovered some of that money, about maybe half of it, but they are still. I mean, you guys are, it's an irresponsible district as far as I can tell, just by looking at their bond history. There's no law that says they can't be irresponsible. I mean, it's very fact situation related. The easier things to go after are things like the oversight. I mean, I looked at your oversight committee. They don't have a website, first of all. It's required by law. They meet, but apparently they don't look at any expenditures, because there's not none of the expenditures that they, if they have looked at any, are on the web page that they're allocated. Whereas, the Educational Foundation, the SEE, has almost an entire website on the district's website. It has its own menu, its own everything. The Oversight Committee has one page, and by law, they're required to have a website. The Oversight Committee's power is totally public relations. I mean, they have their job is to report what's happening with the money, not to approve it, not to say everything is spent correctly. Their only job is to report what's actually happening. And I know for a fact that every school district in the state, including yours, because it's in their measure. I mean, I see the language in the measure where it says this, and this is the language. I'll read this right out of the GG measure. It says they're going to each project includes staff training expenses. Staff training is definitely not a facility project. Payment of the cost of the master plan. Master plans are operating expenses that are required by law for every district to have. This is not bond related. But the big one is that they're going to pay for leases. In other words, to pay off leases that they may have acquired in the past. So they may be doing this right now, and it is listed in the bond, but there's nobody's looking at it because they don't know what to look for. And here's the big one. It took me a minute to find it because they keep switching around where they put this in. Proceeds of the bonds may be used to pay or reimburse the district for the cost of district staff. Illegal. And if they've done that, that is something that there's no black or white. It is black or white. It's not like, well, the board can decide to do that. No, if they're doing that, which I almost guarantee you they are, they're funneling money out of the bond fund into the general fund, and they're saying, well, this is, a secretary is needed to do this, or we hired somebody to oversee these projects, and therefore we're going to pay them out of bond money. Absolutely not. Under no law is that allowable.
So if they do that, could they be criminally responsible? Is that one way we can go after this?
Yes. In other words, that's a non-discretionary issue. In other words, so if I were looking for things to go after, I would go after the things that they did in connection with the election, which the statute of limitations has not yet run on, the surveys and the advisors that they had that put out all the fancy brochures for the election. If they used public funds, which they did, then that's a crime. If they post bond after they've actually spending the money, the easiest low-hanging fruit to go after is the operating expenses and salaries. So if they have reimbursed themselves, like for the cost of the election, for example, the election might have cost $50,000, let's say. Well, where did that money come from? Did it come from was there a debit to the bond account because of that? Illegal. And the county treasurer might be in doo-doo on this as well, because the county treasurer should recognize that these things are not allowed for bonds, period. You see, I think this is ongoing criminal activity over long periods of time. They've gotten so used to it that they just feel this is business as usual for them. This is the kind of stuff that these people do. They are doing things that are not allowed, but they do it to the extent that they can get away with it. This is what I tell everybody that has this kind of situation. And many, many people that are members of the website have this kind of situation. You are the media. You are the media. The old media, the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it, are not interested in this. It doesn't get them ratings. It actually might hurt them in sense of community favor, because some of these people have powers, connected with how money is spent. That your paper gets public notices and makes $500,000 on public notices every year. Well, we're not going to do public notices as your paper anymore. That kind of thing. I'm looking at the arguments that were filed in this thing. Haney Hong, San Diego County Taxpayers Association, he signed the ballot argument in favor of this. Has anybody, gone to, for example, the Taxpayers Association and made a complaint? That who is the guy on the oversight committee? Ken Williams. Who is he? Is he doing anything on the oversight committee to do this? Why isn't he raising any issues? I mean, you look at their minutes for these meetings, and there's nothing being done. They watch some slideshows. The superintendent signs the minutes. This is not an independent committee. So those are the kinds of things where you have statutes that actually that prevent them from doing things that I think are much more viable to go after. Saying that the committee is covering up what the district is doing, and put them on the spot. But you have to publicize it yourself. You're not going to get the newspapers and so forth to report on it until it makes the AP wire or something, because some reporter picked it up somewhere and decided, hey, this sounds interesting, and then they might pick it up. But it's like a Me Too type thing. Now that somebody else is doing it, now we'll take an interest in it. But until somebody else is interested, we're not going to be interested. The policy decisions are extremely difficult to fight. If you fight them, you'll use up your army. Oversight, misuse of bond funds, elections, misuse of public resources involving the election. The latter two, the misuse of bond funds and the public funds for the election, are crimes, felonies, literally. That will put them on the defensive if you go after them. The other one, the oversight committee, there's no crimes involved there, but you can go after the auditors, the supposedly independent auditor. There must have had an audit by now that they're going to parade around saying we spent all the money correctly. The auditors and the lawyers all have associations that they belong to, or a regulatory licensing authority of some kind. Complaints. In other words, if there's a lawyer involved in this that fraudulently represented the law on these things, I would make complaints against them. I mean, these are things that don't cost you money, and that's one of my criteria. It doesn't cost you money, and an individual can do it without an army. So you have to go do some research to find out. Ask for the contract for the lawyer, the bond counsel. Your bond counsel is Jones Hall, the biggest bond counsel in the state for school districts. All right. So the lawyer at Jones Hall did this, and they wrote it specifically for this, and Jones Hall got paid for this. And then they made more money by doing supposedly the paperwork to get this bond issued. But if you go after Jones Hall, it could be to the state treasurer's office, it could be to the FPPC, for example, because he basically contributed to the election campaign by providing services that were not paid for by the school district. In other words, he basically lumped them into the payment that he was going to get when he issued the bond just a few months later. You know, this is the kind of stuff that goes on. You had an advertising firm that probably was hired by the school district that was used in the campaign. So looking at the campaign filings for this district, you probably will find a TBWB or some advertising firm. There are firms that are involved in this that are all complicit in either getting the measure passed or in spending the money. And I would just venture to say that if you actually dug into the oversight, the actual expenditures against the bond, you will find that they're already paying hundreds of thousands of dollars back to the district, or they're using, or they used it to pay expenses that were previously paid by the district. It's also not allowed. I mean, this is a technique that is used by these people that are doing this. The oversight committee doesn't even see it. They in June of every year, as they're getting ready to close their books for the fiscal year, they make all kinds of adjustments. And among those adjustments will be adjustments like, oh, well, this was paid out of district funds, but now we're going to make an adjustment to make it paid out of bond funds. So it's not even an agenda item as such. It's just like a bookkeeping entry that is now compiled with a bunch of other bookkeeping entries that all of a sudden $1 million. One school district up in Yolo County, in their most recent audit report from like, I guess this was 2016 now, when I saw it, transferred $8 million from the bond fund to their general fund through bookkeeping entries in June in the wrap-up of the thing. The Oversight Committee never saw those expenditures.
So is that illegal?
Yes. I mean, anything that goes to the school district would be illegal. Any monies that are going back to the school district would be illegal. And it can add up to millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars, even on a small bond like this. You figure 10 to 20% of the bond is going back to the school district. $2.5 million over the life of the bond, and most of it could have already happened. The people go back to the emotional policy decisions. You're not going to win on those. It would be much easier to just elect. Elections are coming up in November. August 10th is the deadline for filing. Elect members to the school board. That will stop it right there.
They're starting the demolishing in June.
You can say we're already going to give up and not do that, but you don't know that they will do it in June. A lot of people, when they get frustrated, talk about recalls. There's no point in recalls, but you could start the campaign now. And if you found, 2 or 3 members of that board potentially will change in November. You run as a slate, you run on this bond issue, and you can start now. In other words, there's nothing that says you can't start the campaign to let them know that you're coming for them.
Is there any way we can get some kind of injunction to postpone this for a year?
Obviously, if you started a lawsuit, that might postpone it. But typically, what you're going to have to do in that case is post a bond, because if they're going to claim that they'll be damaged by delay, because they have to do things in the summer. In other words, they've already borrowed. They borrowed the money in 2017. In February. Why didn't they do this in 2017 that summer? Why did they issue the bond so early, and now taxpayers have been paying for a year, and the money's just been sitting around, unless it hasn't. I don't know how much money has been spent. The bond advisors and the bond counsel wanted to be paid for all the work they did to help them get this passed, so that's why the bond was issued. You see, in other words, these things don't, who came up with the idea? You have an election in November, right? In November 2016. They have to wait 30 days before it's certified. Then they have to put it on their minutes. So at earliest, they had to do December. The bond issue is already in the works because they couldn't have sold it in February if it hadn't been in the works because they have to give the state treasurer 30 days notice. So this is all the payoff. I mean, this is an example of the cartel working. They helped them win the election, and they got their pay. And they take it out in the $78,000 ISIM advisors get for what? A brand new issue, 3.8%. Give me a break. Go look at all the other bonds that were issued in February, school bonds that were issued in February 2017. Who had to pay 3.8%? I bet nobody. Maybe this is a complaint to the treasurer and say, why was this rate so high? In other words, what was going on here? Who was being paid off? Why did you receive $485,000 back as a premium on this? In other words, where did that $485,000 go? There's all kinds of questions that can be done, and the areas that to go after, like I said before, are the campaign, the election campaign itself, which is still within the statute of limitations, crimes connected with it, and then the financial misuse of funds, the spending of it. But I would say that the FPCC, they had no purpose for this money when it was issued. I believe there's a statute or some kind of a rules or regulations that say you can't just, why didn't they issue all $22 million? Well, because they had no idea of what they were going to use it for. In other words, you can't issue bonds in advance, so far in advance that they're not going to be spent in a reasonable amount of time, because then the people are paying for something and they're not getting anything. All they're doing is paying. It's already been on your tax bill for 2017. By September, you'll see it on your tax bill for 2018-19. So there'll be two tax bills that you can see where this is going. That's an avenue to address and getting people riled up. Why did they issue more than half of the bonds when they didn't know what they were going to spend it on? Well, they should have an oversight report for the fiscal year ending 2017, which won't include very much, because the auditor will only have done probably up through June 30th for the February money, but who knows what was spent in that time. But there's probably been a lot more spent between June and now, but who knows what the expenditures are. The absolute first thing I would do is ask for a list of detailed list of every single expenditure that was charged to the bond fund thus far. I mean, because that will be revealing who was paid. Maybe some, other firm that now you can see, why is he getting paid for this? Or, how much is this architect being paid? Or, how much money is going back to the school district? The kind of things that you need for the financial stuff are actual payments of money. Without that, you can't even talk about it, really. You don't want to have to try to piece it together, because they will also do book entries that, in other words, it's paid one thing here out of one fund, and then later it's switched off, like I just explained. Go to the Oversight Committee and ask them, I want a list of all the expenditures that you've reviewed, because that's your job under the law. You are to review expenditures, so I want the list. Please, can I have it? It's not on your website where it's required to be, so I'm asking you, there's techniques I use or coach people on to do these kind of things so that they don't get embroiled in some other thing like, oh, that's a public records request. Excuse me, no. These are supposed to be posted on the website. They're nowhere on the website. So you're already violating the law on oversight. I would go and look at how the Oversight Committee was appointed. I would get the applications that were filed. What was the process to appoint people? Who are these people? Are they married to the school board members? I mean, who knows who they are? But I mean, one district up in, that just had a bond election the same month that you did. One of the members of the Oversight Committee is an accountant who works for a vendor for the school. So, I mean, how do you know this unless you do the digging? But until you do the digging, and it's not, like I said, it's not going to cost you money. These are public records. I mean, if a few cents if you actually require copies, but I think you can get them for no charge at all, because public records, there's no mandatory thing that says they have to charge you. It says they may charge you.
Right.
costs.
Anyway, a few cents is okay.
Yeah.
Considering what we're fighting against, that's why I put almost a whole month, day and night, into making that video you saw. I thought, well, it's worth it, it's worth my time and effort to do whatever I can to stop this.
Well, and unfortunately, once the bond is passed, trying to stop the decision-making is very, very, very difficult.
The law that I saw said that they must use the bond funds only for what is described in the bond. What was described in the bond measure was clearly some basic repairs and replacing 2 small classroom buildings in the back. So how can they take that measure and use it for something, I would say, not even one person who isn't affiliated would have ever voted for, and use our money and really destroy our peacefulness for, several years, and take away our park and ruin our quality of life for completely unnecessary rebuilding without any approval from taxpayers.
They do it because they can. And this is government by what we can get away with. In other words, until somebody sues them, until somebody goes to jail over it, they will continue to do what they're doing because they feel either morally that they are justified because in their minds it's for the kids, or they've been told by other people that this is all legal. In other words, and I will almost guarantee you that the lawyers that are telling them this is legal are not putting this in writing. What they do put in writing is all the actual stuff that is legal, which is following the dictates, at least for Proposition 39 bonds, of the Constitution. So when they say that we can do anything that's in the bond measure, the measure that the voters voted on, that's actually not true, because they can only do the things in the bond measure that are also allowed by the California Constitution, which is very limiting in some senses on what can be done. And there's examples of additional statutes that have been written specifically regarding school bonds, because Proposition 39 is not the only kind of bonds that they can issue, where it actually gives a list of the kinds of things that they can do. And in general, they are what you would consider, if you were a property owner, as improvements that result in a taxable event of some kind. Because when people think of improvements, they think, oh, we're going to repaint the house, I'm going to re-roof it, rebuild the fence, or put a new garage door. Those are not improvements that result in a new taxable event that the assessor looks at. When they look at improvements, they think of, oh, you're going to put in a pool where you didn't have one before. That's an improvement. In other words, it's a very specific thing that has years and years of case law connected with it on what a real property improvement is. So, and that's pretty much what the statutes allow, is improvements. So when you see they're going to put in new rugs or replace the flooring, those are not improvements. They might get away with it, and most people would not object to that. So it's sort of like you give them an inch, and then they take the mile type approach here. Because you've basically said, well, you can do this and this and this, even though a lot of times they call it in their measures, they call it basic repairs. So repairs are not improvements. That's just maintaining.
So those shouldn't even be on these bonds, really, on these measures.
If it were fought, I believe that they would be not allowed to do those kind of things. Yes, there is language in it that go after the list that says. And we can do anything else we want, and we don't have to do any of this. But because they don't allocate funds, in other words, they don't show the taxpayers, well, we're going to replace roofs, and we estimate that to be, $500,000. And in other words, there's nothing in here in this measure for Cardiff and for any other bonds or of recent vintage that tells you how much money they're going to allocate to each of these things. So they could take one of these things and say, construct new restrooms, and which is one of the things that they said they would do. Well, they might have maybe they're going to spend, $5 million on constructing new restrooms, because then they have state-of-the-art, solar-powered, non-sewer using whatever construction for that. But if the voters saw that oh, they were going to do $5 million on that, they might have said no. But because they lump it all in, you can't tell what the money is going to be spent on. I mean, any building that was built since the 1938 Long Beach earthquake, any school building is super constructed. I mean, unlike every other government building, school buildings had a huge requirement after that Long Beach earthquake that makes them almost indestructible. So the only reason why these buildings would be falling apart is because they're not being maintained, not because they're structurally unsound. But if you're talking about building buildings, that's what bonds are legitimately used for. You can't say, no, you can't do that. But you're right about the deception, because when you look at the language used in these things, they use all kinds of different words, none of which are defined. Like it says, do we have, I'm just going to look at Cardiff schools in your bond. It said the bullet points, just the first word. Replace, renovate, upgrade, improve, construct, health, safety improvements, upgrade, resurface. So there you just have the lead word, the verb. What do any of those things mean? Upgrade and improve. What's the difference? Who knows? That could mean, to you, it could mean one thing, and to somebody it could mean another one. But to be specific for this list, it should say something like, we're going to redo the playgrounds completely.
I'm looking for where do we have an option to fight this and say, no, that's not even mentioned in the bond, in the measure, so you can't do that.
There are some things that you could probably do like that. Tearing down, buildings that have no damage to them at all could be one area. But this is always disappointing to people when they hear about it. And I'd like to get to the hard truth, so to speak, on this stuff. School district boards of trustees have incredible super discretion. They are actually given authority in the code that they can do anything that they want that's related to schools. In other words, that they don't need a specific statute that says they can do this. That's unlike most government agencies, which can only do what they're allowed to do by statute. School boards were given this extreme power that basically is you can do anything, regardless of whether it's in the code, the education code, as long as it's reasonably related to school, the function of what you're doing. So you have the biggest problem that you have after a bond is passed is the district can do almost anything it wants, regardless of what it said in the bond, because they have that power. The other problem is that because these things are so vague, and they were never defined, like I was just, upgrade, what does upgrade mean versus improve? Those are terms that could have many different meanings. So it's hard to fight those kind of things. The kind of things that and most people, those are the emotional things. So those are the things that they want to fight. And unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that you can do in fighting them. A local district up in here, Los Angeles County, just got a lawsuit dismissed. They were trying to do one of those emotional things. And I told them before they even got the lawyer that I don't think you're going to go very far with this, because regardless of what you say, the school district has a tremendous amount of discretion in what they do.
Even if the bond says something else.
Only because the way it's said, it's so vague. And then there's escape language put into it. They say down below, the final cost of each project is so and so. We don't know whether we can get this done. In other words, we don't have to do any of this stuff. We can decide which things to do and which not to do. But because you don't have a budget connected with this measure that shows you what amounts they were planning on spending, is very, very difficult.
I wish we could postpone it for a year, get 2 more people in there, and do whatever other research we need to do to at least get a plan that works, where they're not building a building for weddings and, taking over our park and all that.
I mean, even that. You see, now, the thing is that your best tool in this war is public relations. When you wield the public relations arm, even if it's just posting it on bulletin boards, going to meetings where people get, like there'll be like maybe like graduation or continuing ceremonies or whatever at the school. Go over there with flyers and say, this is what they're doing. They're going to, when you come back next summer or after the summer, you're going to, this is all going to be gone, or something like that. What about the parents at these other schools? Are they going to like it when their school is now overcrowded because there's a whole other school that's being housed in this other place? I don't know. It's a district-wide issue. It's not just this one school, but your biggest weapon is public relations, and that's what the Oversight Committee should be doing. And if the Oversight Committee is not doing it, for example, I will host an Oversight Committee website for that district, just like I do for the bond measures, that people can put up the information that they gather so that it's available without you having to figure out how to design it and get the data in there and all that other stuff. So, I'm not going to I would do it for free, but I'm not going to collect the data. Somebody has to provide the data and like these are all the expenditures. The Oversight Committee is not putting this up. The Oversight Committee is violating the law. Here, go to this website and you'll get where all this money is being spent. Look at how much money is going back to the school district. Now people file complaints with the district attorney saying it's a misuse of bond funds. They might have committed fraud with the Securities and Exchange Commission. What did they put on their disclosure documents? There's all kinds of things that, because I've seen Jones Hall disclosure documents. They don't tell what they're going to do with the money. But one thing they do put in the disclosure documents is no administrator salaries. They quote that right out of the Constitution. So if they're paying administrator salaries, now I file it with the district attorney, I file it with the Securities and Exchange Commission, with the IRS, because the IRS allows these bonds to be tax exempt. If you violate the IRS rules, they can take away the tax exemption. The investors will be very unhappy with that, and the people that sold them, the underwriters, will be very unhappy because their clients are very unhappy. I'm not going to give you false hope that you're going to be able to stop. That's going to stop what's happening in June.
In a few months, right.
To stop that, you probably need to get a lawyer. If you can push it back, do they have a plan? If they're planning on basically vacating the school for a year, or even for several,
like 2-3 years. Mm-hmm.
Oh, 2-3. So that plan, whatever it is, has that been implemented yet? Have they approved it?
I've never heard anything about that plan in any of the reports from the
if they don't have a plan, that might be a way to stop it. In other words, they're going to start construction of this, and they don't even have a plan. And there's all different kinds of agencies that could be complained with. The County Office of Education would be one place that I would start with and they just got a new superintendent because the other guy was being sued for misuse of or stealing from the County Office of Education.
I did hear about in San Ysidro, all that, but that wasn't a cash thing, was it?
Well, it was, but it was much more than that. See, it's included in what they did. They also misused bond funds, all right? But that's not what the district attorney went after him for. And Bonnie Dumais Dumanet is now running for supervisor. So she's a piece of work. She has a corruption unit that doesn't investigate any corruption unless it becomes a scandal. But she does have a corruption unit, and that's the place that would be the place to file these complaints with. That's what their job is.
So don't focus so much on they're taking away our park, but focus on
they're stealing money. Because if you can redirect their focus to having now to protect against them, you're stealing money, then they might be a little bit distracted from that, or they might be trying to need time to cover things up some more.
But we don't know that they are stealing money until we investigate.
I guarantee you they're stealing money. But every school district does it. It's in their. It's part of what they do with these bonds. Their budgets are going to be crunched by these new. Every year, their pension contributions are going through the roof. They need all the money they can get because they want to keep the people paid with their nice cushy jobs and their nice cushy salaries. So they're never going to give up that. And that's why the schools are falling into disrepair, why they need to fix things that should not be fixed with bond money. It's unfortunately just the way it is. And they are stealing money. I can guarantee you they're taking money and reimbursing themselves out of bond funds. They want these monuments to themselves. That's a lot of what this is. So when this new thing goes up, whatever it is, they'll be able to show their buddies, yeah, we got this built. Isn't this beautiful? I mean, we have, crystal windows or, a skyscape that opens up that lets us look at the stars at night. Whatever it is that they actually build finally will be something that they will take credit for and that will, satisfy some ego need that they have for look what I did. And all they did was steal the money to do it.
Which has nothing to do with education.
Well, obviously, what does hosting weddings have to do with education? The person to target, if you're targeting somebody, is the superintendent. I think it's a woman. I think.
Jill.
Okay.
Jill Vincent.
She's the one that's going to be criminally liable for the election stuff.
Really?
It's not going to be the trustees. They're exempt because they don't work for the district. They only get paid when they come to a meeting. Targeting. She is the one behind all this. In other words, the trustees don't dream up this stuff. She goes to the conferences, she goes to the, association of school staff things, and she goes to the cash conference and stuff like that. She schmoozes and does and says, somebody shows her, oh, and look what we can build, and we can do it for a real good deal. Do you have any bond money? Oh, well, we'll help you get the bond passed. That's the kind of stuff that goes on. But she is the one that's coming up with these plans. She and her staff. It's her vision. This is not the trustees' vision. They just sit there and say yes. And if they like what she's doing, they'll say yes, 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 yes. And once they sign off on it, they're not likely to want to go back and say we made a mistake, right? You're dealing with psychology here from the board members mostly. But the person that came up with this idea is the superintendent.
Well, that's very important to know. She's a very nice woman, but boy, may not be as nice as she seems.
Bill Clinton or Donald Trump, I'm sure
that's
no matter
right.
which one you meet, they're going to be charming as hell when you meet them.
That's right. That's right. Criminals, too, can be very charming.
Yeah.
And
it's not whether they're nice people.
Right.
They're doing something that, in their mind, is okay. They've already justified it, however they justified it. But in terms of fiduciary responsibility and so forth, it doesn't matter. It's not their money. All they're looking at is the grandeur, so that this will be a building that will be for 100 years, and children will come here to worship and thank, the Mindy K. Mork Staff Auditorium or whatever they call it.
Right.
That's what they go for. If the kids get some benefit out of it, they say, well, it's for the kids. It doesn't matter that it cost 20 times what it should have cost. I'm not saying that filing these complaints and so forth is going to have a direct impact immediately, but not doing it will definitely not do anything. And if you can find a lawyer that's willing to do something that might bump it, in other words, get it delayed a little bit so that they can't start it when they plan on starting it, that probably would give you more time. So you get 2 school board members in there, and they still have a 3-2 advantage over you. So it's not. If they were 3 up for election this time, then that would be. But you never know. One of them might retire. This happens all the time. Even if they move from the district, they have to resign. So there's lots of situations, and in those cases where the school board appoints new people, that's an even worse situation because they're only going to appoint somebody that's already agreeing with everything they do because they appoint them illegally. I know that this happens illegally all the time, but nobody understands the due process implications. They'll find somebody and appoint them among themselves, but they won't have a procedure that has already been approved. In other words, they will do it just like they'll do it seat of the pants.
Just like everything else they're doing. Thank you so much. You are
Okay.
a fountain of information. So anybody who's listening to this, you can go to bigbadbonds.com, and I know that Richard has every Wednesday night a phone meeting where he coaches people around California on how to deal with the situation and keep these bonds from being approved, these measures from being approved when they're inappropriate. So I hope local people and statewide people, and I understand they're taking this to other states now. I saw that Seattle is using their model to do the same thing up there. I really appreciate your energy and your enthusiasm and your knowledge, and I really thank you for this conversation.
Beautiful Cardiff-by-the-Sea, a surfing town paradise north of San Diego, California. In 1911, the developer's wife convinced him to name the community after her hometown in Cardiff, Wales. Cardiff Elementary is a beautiful school for around 375 kindergarten through third graders, next to the community's small but precious soccer, family, and community park.
We just said we don't want it.
No.
We want a redesign.
We're moving on.
The park preserved.
An explosive meeting just came to an end.
These guilty-looking school board members are in the middle of running a $22 million bait-and-switch scheme on voters. In November 2016, the board posted a misleading and ultimately fraudulent ballot measure that described the need to fix roofs, plumbing, and electrical systems in Cardiff's already well-maintained elementary school.
Emotions erupted after the chairman of the Cardiff School Board seemingly pushed aside the concerns of nearly all the residents who packed the meeting room regarding the redevelopment plan for Cardiff Elementary.
In what looks like a plan to fool voters, and without notification to or input from residents, the school board secretly approved their bait-and-switch plan to tear down nearly the entire school, kill majestic, long-standing trees, and destroy our blessed park. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They want to pave paradise and put up a bunch of unnecessary buildings. Who's making all that money? This is what voters thought they were approving with Measure GG. The main language in the measure requested funds to repair roofs, plumbing, and electrical systems, and to replace the 2 portable classrooms in the back. This is the school board's renegade plan that will destroy the current buildings, trees, and park for around the same amount of classroom space.
In order to accommodate these big courtyards, and there are several very big courtyards, they are having to put all of the kindergarten and the daycare center over on our soccer field. It's a big sacrifice to take away the community's open space and the kids' open space and play area. That area is used constantly. All of us who live here, we see it being used all the time. Weekends, after school, and it's important.
The measure presented to voters did not say a single word about the school board's sneaky plan to rebuild the school and spread out those new buildings all over our beautiful park.
I'd love it to be a safer campus. I love the idea of a compound. I don't think it needs to be as spread out. I think the open space is something that we should try to protect, make it a tighter campus.
Urban school districts very easily don't have the space, do all kinds of wonderful imaginative things with kids, and they won't have to take that dome that you see. You don't want to pave paradise to put up a parking lot. You never will get this back if you put those buildings up.
The school board hid this bait and switch from nearly all the voters and residents for months after they approved the planned destruction of George Burkish Field in a meeting with only a handful of residents and without consulting any experts beyond their own hired designers.
Okay, guys.
If one valiant resident hadn't informed some neighbors about these plans with a postcard and a website, the entire town would have awakened one morning to find bulldozers destroying their beloved Burkitch Park. Too late for anyone to stop the renegade school board's fraudulent bait-and-switch $22 million desecration of our well-intentioned votes.
I'm not going to use words that are painful for anybody or be accusatory, but I was not informed about the changes. I heard about this word of mouth the day before the August 30th meeting. I understand the June meeting had somewhere around 5 or 6 residents there.
But when I saw the proposal last week that took up open space, I just got ticked off. I thought, this is wrong.
You know, I'm an avid reader of everything I see, and I voted for the first bond, and I voted for GG, and quite frankly, and I vote for almost every school bond, I really believe in it, but if I would have seen that the park was going to be taken away, I wouldn't have voted for it.
And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the way that the bond was worded and how, yes, the bond passed, but I think if a lot of the community members understood what was really going to happen, they might have voted against it.
I don't think we need a new all-purpose room. We've got this nice library, we've got the big auditorium. I think it's a waste of taxpayers' money. And the pretense of safety and welcoming appearance of the school, I think that's a bunch of BS. Thank you.
Yeah, I would never have voted to make the changes that are currently designed.
I didn't realize they're doing that. They're taking us off the fields. I think that'd be a bummer. The fields have been a key part here because our kids have been playing soccer and coming down here on the weekends, everything like that. So I would like to see all the fields stay and continue with just the buildings that we have and remodeling those and making those better.
What's been lost in this design is this is not a high school or a college campus. This is a kindergarten, 3rd grade campus.
This unnecessary and very sloppy-looking plan would forever destroy a small but precious George Burkitch Park that has been a constantly enjoyed treasure of the community for decades.
In a recent email to parents, the district wrote that the new plan increases student safety and security. And does the new design actually deliver more security? It didn't make sense to me that this more sprawling, spread out campus would be safer than a centralized one with tight-knit buildings. I have here part of a report from the National Institute of Justice titled The Appropriate and Effective Use of Security Technology in U.S. Schools. And it states that the #1 way to make schools safer is to limit the number of buildings. And they warn that schools with open floor plans are more difficult to secure. And I think that makes intuitive sense. The more spread out the buildings are, the harder it is to secure those buildings.
K through 3 do not need a community college campus. Daycare doesn't need to be in an Ocean View property. There is available square footage. You guys need to just go back to the drawing board. The planning, I wasn't involved, but it seems like a haphazard layout of buildings. You can condense them. You can make it more safe. Don't be short-sighted. Give me 5 more seconds. Don't be short-sighted and just take the space because you can. I implore you to make it better. Thank you.
I personally voted no on this, on Measure GG, because I knew this would happen. I knew forever things change. When there's money involved, things are going to change.
The well-maintained school underwent a full year of repairs, remodels, and renovations in 2002, with a school bond that local taxpayers will be continuing to pay off for the next 9 years.
We're giving up so much in order to expand the campus. And I think it's because there's a concept problem with the school board, or maybe it's not the school board, maybe it's the people who are advising the school board.
We need an investigative reporter and some lawyers.
I think preserving the space and field would be good and important example for the children of Cardiff. I do not see the need for a large footprint campus. This is a small school.
I do have a concern about the open space as well. I think the triangular end of the field doesn't make sense for kids. And I have a concern about the soccer fields and the space needed for people to enjoy watching their kids play soccer, and for the practices that happen as well, which is not simply about holding 2 games. We have loads and loads of kids out here practicing soccer all the time.
It is so vital
for our kids to be able to have that space to play on.
We talk about this is for the children, and I think what we need for the children is a very compact school, like we have. New buildings, the ones that need to be replaced, and we need to keep our open space. My experience is, and I'm sure everybody's experience here is, once open space is gone, it's gone. It doesn't come back.
The plans that I've seen do not allow for these beautiful Tory pines to be retained.
Mr. Burkage was my 6th grade teacher. The Tory pines, here's a picture of them being planted, because my dad planted them.
When I tried to give the school board president my card to invite someone from the board to give their view in this film, Mark Whitehouse shooed me away like a dog, saying, "Sit down, sit down." I invited the board members to let me interview them so that we could get a comprehensive picture, not just my view, which is very one-sided. I think Mark was very upset and wouldn't pick my card.
I heard a lot about getting rid of George Burkage Park. George Burkage Park is not going anywhere. The reconfiguration of the school is happening.
I acknowledge the concerns with the views changing. It's tough when you have to change with the open space, and I know that all of us as a board are really committed to open space.
From my point of view, to be good stewards with taxpayers' money, it made more sense to build, a new school. I'd rather see a new campus, and this is hard.
On that, I also came into this close to tears because not this meeting, I mean the beginning of this whole planning process, because I am so concerned about our little children. They are so defenseless. Plus, the adults who are here.
What does that mean?
But especially our babies. We have to do the best for them.
Overall, I think this is a fairly benign plan. It doesn't take too much of the field. It certainly doesn't destroy Burkage Field. That's another upsetting thing, is the literature that's gone out that's mischaracterized this project. It is not destroying Burkage Field.
Everybody again for coming tonight. I know that this has been a long meeting and you've all taken...
Mark looked like he was sitting in a pub, while ignoring all the well-expressed feedback from residents and even his co-board members, before announcing at the end that he was deciding to go forward with this plan no matter what anyone had to say about it.
The main purpose of this school is to educate children. It's not a park. It's to educate children. It's not a plan that is radical at all, in my view. I think it's a great plan. I support it. But this is a conceptual design. It's a step forward in the direction that we plan to go, in my view.
It's amazing how a few people in so-called power positions can affect many others' tranquility with their decisions. No matter how you spin it, if it isn't an example of bait and switch, it certainly is as close as you can get.
What was written is way different than what is going on right now.
State law requires the district to establish an independent citizens oversight committee. I don't know who's on that committee, but no residents I know have seen them doing a thing to rein in the school board's improper plans or to notify residents. The proceeds from the sale of the bonds are to be used only for the purposes specified.
Now, if you look at the Measure AA that Earl Warren presented, it was much shorter and very, very much to the point. And in Earl Warren, they say that they're going to replace and reconstruct, modernize outdated classrooms, and then make new classrooms. And then they had an entire extensive plan that's been updated as well to the community. So I feel like Earl Warren is a good example of a group that really helped their community understand exactly what they were voting on and exactly what they were getting. Don't feel like that happened here in Cardiff, and I hope that you will reconsider the community's involvement and our concern over a loss of open space.
It seems to me that there's a big difference between, renovate, deteriorate plumbing, sewer systems, repair, replace roofs. I don't think, I think what we're doing is we're demolishing the school, certainly all of the classrooms, multi-purpose room and food service, and building everything new. Now, I know that that's what everybody voted on, and I think there's a lot of people in the community who are very upset about the fact that it's a brand new school, and that that's what the school board's decided to do. And I think there's some deeper issues here, and I think the school board might be in trouble for that. But I'm not threatening that. It's not anything I'm interested in doing. I just want you guys to be aware that that's not what this bond issue says.
Who's making all that money? Who's making all that money? Don't it always seem to go money that you don't know what you got till it's money. They want to pave paradise, put up a bunch of unnecessary buildings. We're just a small community, simple but lovely folks.
They should just keep what they have right now, because that's like the Cardiff vibe. Like the building right now, it's the Cardiff vibe.
Please join us, help us, let the Cardiff School Board know they cannot pave paradise to put up a bunch of unnecessary